He seemed like just another lonely old man in the building, quiet and unnoticed. They called him the uncle on the 4th floor. Then, a little girl's lost drawing led to a discovery about his secret identity that astonished the entire neighborhood. Who is the mysterious man upstairs? Drop a comment telling us which city you're watching from. Give this video a like if you love heartwarming secrets, and subscribe so you don't miss the incredible reveal. Let's move into the Chestnut Arms. The groan of the moving truck's hydraulics, lowering the ramp, echoed oddly on the narrow, picturesque street in Philadelphia's Queen Village. Cobblestones, worn smooth by centuries of passage, peeked out from beneath patches of asphalt near the curb. Dignified brick row houses, adorned with intricate ironwork and flower boxes, still boasting resilient late-autumn blooms, stood shoulder to shoulder with the slightly larger, more imposing facade of the Chestnut Arms apartment building. Sarah Miller drew in a deep breath, the crisp October air carrying the faint, earthy scent of the nearby Delaware River mixed with the urban aroma of coffee drifting from a cafe down the block. Excitement warred with a bone-deep exhaustion from the long drive from Ohio and the stress of the move. "Well," she said, trying to inject optimism into her voice for her husband Tom's sake, "it definitely has character." "Character is just another word for needs work, Sarah," Tom chuckled, emerging from the truck cab, stretching his stiff back. "But hey, location, right? And the school scores are great." He hefted the first heavy box labeled Kitchen Fragile with a determined grunt. "Okay, Team Miller, Operation New Life commences now." 6-year-old Lily, clutching her floppy-eared stuffed bunny, Pip, with a white-knuckled grip, peered up at the 4-story brick building. Her expression was a mixture of apprehension and curiosity. The Chestnut Arms wasn't imposing like a skyscraper, but it had a certain weight, a sense of history that felt different from their suburban home back in Columbus. Its large bay windows seemed like watchful eyes, the heavy stone entryway like a stern mouth. "Does it have ghosts, Mommy?" she whispered, pressing closer to Sarah's leg. "No ghosts, sweetie," Sarah reassured her, smoothing Lily's flyaway hair. "Just lots of nice new neighbors, probably." Though looking at the slightly forbidding entrance, she wasn't entirely convinced herself. The lobby confirmed the building's age and character. Cool terracotta tiles, slightly cracked in places, covered the floor. The walls were paneled in dark wood halfway up, topped with textured plaster that likely hid decades of paint layers. A faint scent of lemon oil polish and something else, maybe old paper or dried flowers, hung in the air. An ornate, slightly tarnished brass elevator cage stood silently at one end, looking like something out of an old movie. Their progress was immediately overseen by Mr. Henderson, the building superintendent, who appeared as if summoned by the rumble of the moving truck. He was a stout man whose gray, perpetually skeptical eyebrows seemed to enter a room before he did. He surveyed the Millers and their accumulating pile of boxes with an air of profound suspicion. "Millers, apartment 2B?" he queried, his voice raspy. Sarah nodded confirmation. "All right, keep the lobby clear. Use the service elevator only. Pads are already up. No scuffing the walls, no propping open the main door. I check for damages after every move-in." He delivered the instructions like a drill sergeant inspecting barracks. Despite his gruffness, however, Sarah noted he efficiently directed the movers and handled the aged elevator with practiced expertise. He clearly took pride in his domain, however worn it might be. Their second-floor apartment was a pleasant surprise in terms of space. High ceilings gave an airy feel, and the large bay window in the living room offered a lovely view of the tree-lined street below. But the age was apparent. The original hardwood floors creaked musically underfoot. The radiators hissed and clanked with unpredictable enthusiasm, and layers of paint softened the details on the window moldings. As Sarah began the overwhelming task of unpacking the kitchen essentials, directing movers where to place the heavier furniture, she became aware of the building's subtle soundscape. Muffled footsteps from the apartment above, the distant chime of a doorbell, the faint melody of a piano drifting from somewhere down the hall, the soft thud of a closing door. It wasn't noisy, but it wasn't silent either. It felt like a place holding many quiet, separate lives. It was later that first chaotic afternoon, seeking a momentary escape from the tyranny of cardboard boxes, that Sarah stood by the newly cleaned bay window, watching Tom patiently struggle with the instructions for Lily's pink bicycle on the sidewalk below. Her gaze drifted upwards, drawn perhaps by a flicker of movement or just random chance, to the window directly 2 floors above hers, on the 4th floor. An elderly man sat there, perfectly framed by the window pane. He was seated in what looked like a comfortable armchair, pulled close to the glass, bathed in the soft, hazy light of the late afternoon sun. He wasn't reading or watching television. His head was angled slightly, his gaze directed not down at the street activity, but outwards, seemingly fixed on the intricate branching pattern of the large sycamore tree just outside his window, its remaining leaves a burnished gold. He was thin, almost bird-like in his fragility, with a surprising abundance of fine, fly-away white hair that caught the light like a halo. He wore a simple grey cardigan, buttoned over a pale blue collared shirt. His hands rested calmly in his lap. What struck Sarah most was his absolute stillness. He didn't fidget, didn't shift his weight, didn't seem to react to anything. He sat, with a profound, almost meditative quietude, like a figure captured in an old photograph. Sarah watched him for several minutes, fascinated and strangely moved. There was an air of deep solitude about him, a loneliness that felt palpable even from 2 floors below. He looked like someone the world had perhaps forgotten, content, or maybe resigned, to watch it pass by from his window seat. In the hectic days that followed, as the Miller family wrestled with unpacking, assembling furniture, registering Lily for school, and navigating the charming but unfamiliar streets of Queen Village, the man in the 4th floor window became a quiet landmark in Sarah's new mental map of the building. His routine, she quickly observed, was as quiet and predictable as his stillness at the window. Around 10 each morning, she might catch a glimpse of him shuffling slowly down the street, a small canvas tote bag clutched in one hand. He walked with his head slightly bowed, his steps careful on the uneven brick sidewalks, acknowledging other pedestrians, only with a brief, almost imperceptible dip of his chin if they greeted him first. He usually returned about an hour later, the tote bag perhaps slightly fuller, disappearing back into the quiet lobby of the Chestnut Arms. Later in the day, usually from mid-afternoon until dusk began to settle, he would reappear in his armchair, by the window. Sometimes Sarah saw him holding a book or a newspaper, though he rarely seemed to be actively reading, his gaze often drifting back towards the sycamore tree or the sky beyond. More often than not, he simply sat, observing the world outside with that same profound, detached stillness. Sarah never saw anyone visit his apartment. No friends, no family, no healthcare aides. She never saw him pause to chat with neighbors, in the lobby or exchange more than the briefest of nods in the hallway. He seemed to exist within his own quiet, solitary orbit. Curiosity getting the better of her, Sarah asked Mr. Henderson about him one morning when they both found themselves waiting for the slow, rattling elevator. "Mr. Henderson, the gentleman in 4B? Mr. Pendleton, is it? Does he have family nearby?" Henderson grunted, jabbing the up button again impatiently. "Pendleton? Nah, lived here donkey's years. Keeps to himself. Wife passed long ago, no kids far as I know. Gets his groceries delivered sometimes, pays his rent like clockwork. Quiet. As a mouse. Bit odd, maybe, watches that tree like it's going to tell him secrets," he chuckled raspily. "But harmless. Doesn't bother nobody." Harmless but odd seemed to be the prevailing neighborhood assessment. Sarah overheard 2 older women chatting on the front steps one afternoon. "Saw the uncle on the 4th floor out for his walk," one said. "He looks thinner these days, don't you think?" The others sighed. Poor dear. Always alone. Shame, really. They called him the uncle, a generic, slightly pitying moniker for the elderly man whose name they likely didn't know or use, a familiar fixture recognized but fundamentally unknown. Sarah found herself feeling a growing empathy for Mr. Pendleton. Her own grandmother had lived alone in her later years, and Sarah knew how easily solitude could deepen into isolation. She resolved to make a conscious effort, to offer more than just a polite nod if their paths crossed. Maybe just a friendly, "Good morning, Mr. Pendleton, lovely day, could make a small difference. Lily, however, operating without the layers of adult reserve and hesitation, achieved the breakthrough first. One crisp afternoon, returning from school, Lily skipped ahead of Sarah up the main staircase. As they reached the second-floor landing, the door to the stairwell above opened, and Mr. Pendleton began his slow, careful descent, gripping the polished wooden banister tightly with one hand. Lily stopped dead on the landing below him, looking up, her bright eyes wide with curiosity. Pip the bunny dangled from one hand. Instead of shyly looking away as most children did, she beamed. "Hello," she announced cheerfully, her voice echoing slightly in the quiet stairwell. "Are you the uncle?" Mr. Pendleton stopped his descent abruptly, clearly startled by the direct address and the unexpected title. He looked down at the small upturned face, surprise flickering visibly in his pale blue eyes, momentarily chasing away the usual distant haze. He seemed genuinely taken aback, unsure how to respond. Sarah held her breath, ready to gently correct. "Lily." But after a beat of silence, a small, hesitant, almost rusty smile quirked the corners of Mr. Pendleton's thin lips. It transformed his face, softening the lines, revealing a glimpse of unexpected warmth beneath the solitary facade. "Well," he replied, his voice soft and slightly raspy, carrying a gentle, almost old-fashioned cadence. "Hello there, young lady. I suppose some people might call me that," Lily giggled. "I'm Lily, and this is Pip." She held up the stuffed bunny for his inspection. "We just moved in downstairs. Apartment 2B. Mr. Pendleton looked solemnly at Pip, then back at Lily's bright, expectant face. "It is a distinct pleasure to make both your acquaintances, Lily of apartment 2B, and Pip," he said, his voice gaining a touch more strength. The shy smile lingered. Sarah stepped up beside Lily. "Good afternoon, Mr. Pendleton," she said warmly. "Sorry, she's very direct." Mr. Pendleton's gaze shifted to Sarah, the smile fading slightly, but the earlier coldness replaced by a polite acknowledgement. "Quite all right, Mrs. Miller, Sarah Miller. And this is my husband Tom, though he's at work," Sarah offered. "A pleasure, Mrs. Miller," he murmured, giving a small formal nod. He looked back down at Lily, who was still beaming up at him. "Enjoy your new home." Then, seeming to gather himself, he continued his slow, careful descent past them, gripping the banister tightly again. Sarah watched him go down the stairs, a warmth spreading through her. It was such a small interaction, brief and simple, but Lily's innocent, direct friendliness had cracked the shell, elicited a genuine smile, a few sentences more than just polite necessity. Maybe Mr. Henderson was wrong. Maybe Mr. Pendleton wasn't. Just odd. Maybe the uncle on the fourth floor wasn't entirely unreachable. Maybe, Sarah thought with a surge of empathy. All he needed was someone to stop, look past the solitude and simply say hello. Life at the Chestnut Arms settled into a comfortable, if somewhat anonymous, rhythm for the Miller family. Tom adjusted. To his new commute, Sarah learned the quirks of the neighborhood shops and the best routes to Lily's new elementary school, and Lily, with the natural adaptability of childhood, started making friends and exploring the nearby park under Sarah's watchful eye. Their second-floor apartment began to feel like home, filled with the familiar clutter of family life, Lily's artwork taped to the refrigerator, Tom's work bag perpetually by the door, the comforting aroma of Sarah's attempts at baking. In the slightly unpredictable old oven, their awareness of Mr. Pendleton, the quiet man upstairs, also became part of their routine. They didn't seek him out, respecting his apparent desire for solitude, but their paths crossed occasionally in the narrow hallways, by the mailboxes in the lobby, or on the front steps. After Lily's initial cheerful greeting in the stairwell, these encounters took on a slightly different quality. Mr. Pendleton still rarely initiated conversation, but he no longer seemed quite so remote, so quick to retreat. If he saw Sarah struggling with grocery bags, he would hold the heavy lobby door open with a quiet, "Allow me." If Lily waved enthusiastically from across the street as he returned from his morning walk, he would sometimes offer a small, hesitant wave back, his pale blue eyes holding a flicker of acknowledgement, before he disappeared inside. He remained a man of profound quietness. Sarah never heard noise from his apartment, no loud television, no music, no sounds of visitors, just the occasional soft creak of floorboards overhead late at night, suggesting he kept solitary hours. His routine remained consistent. The brief morning outing with his canvas tote bag, the long afternoons spent sitting almost motionlessly in his armchair by the fourth-floor window, gazing out at the sycamore tree. Lily, however, seemed determined to forge a connection, undeterred by his reserve. She took to drawing pictures specifically for the uncle, as she now called him. Bright, colourful drawings of flowers, bunnies inspired by Pip, and sometimes surprisingly detailed renderings of the sycamore tree outside his window. "Can I give this to him, Mummy?" she asked one afternoon, holding up a crayon drawing of a particularly cheerful-looking squirrel burying a nut beneath a large tree. Sarah hesitated. She didn't want to impose on Mr. Pendleton's privacy or make him feel obligated. "Well, honey, Mr. Pendleton is very quiet. Maybe he likes being left alone, but maybe he's lonely," Lily insisted with the irrefutable logic of a 6-year-old. Maybe a picture would make him smile. Reluctantly, Sarah agreed they could leave the picture tucked under his apartment door next time they were going out. So, on their way to the park, Lily carefully slid her drawing under the door of 4B. They didn't knock, just left the small offering and continued on their way. Sarah half expected to find the drawing discarded in the hallway later, or perhaps ignored entirely. But the next morning, as Sarah checked their own mailbox in the lobby, she noticed a small, plain white envelope tucked under her own apartment. To 2B. Inside, written on a simple note card in elegant, slightly shaky cursive handwriting, were just 2 words. "Thank you." Below the words was a tiny, exquisitely detailed ink drawing of Pip the bunny, perfectly capturing his floppy ears and stitched nose. Sarah stared at the drawing, astonished. The quiet man upstairs, the one who just sat at his window, could draw like this. The skill, the precision, the unexpected whimsy of the little bunny sketch. It felt completely at odds with the frail, solitary figure she saw each day. It was the first real clue that there was more to Mr. Pendleton than met the "Hi." She showed the note to Lily, whose eyes widened in delight. "He drew Pip. He liked my picture." From then on, leaving drawings for the uncle became Lily's mission. Every few days, a new crayon masterpiece would be slipped under the door of 4B. Sometimes there would be no response. Other times, another small white envelope would appear under their own door a day or 2 later, containing a simple "thank you," and perhaps another tiny, perfect ink drawing, a leaf from the sycamore tree, a detailed feather, a whimsical cat curled asleep. It became a silent, artistic correspondence between the curious little girl and the enigmatic old man. Sarah found herself increasingly intrigued. Who was Arthur Pendleton? Where did this hidden artistic talent come from? She tried discreetly, asking Mr. Henderson again, mentioning the drawings. The superintendent just shrugged, tightening a loose doorknob in the hallway. "Draw? Pendleton? News to me. Always figured he just sat. Maybe he took it up late? Old folks need hobbies, I guess." He clearly knew or cared little about the inner lives of his tenants, beyond their adherence to rules and rent payments. One rainy Saturday afternoon, Sarah was tackling the daunting task of organizing the overflowing bookshelf in their living room. Tom was out running errands, and Lily was sprawled on the floor, deeply engrossed in her own drawing project. The apartment felt cozy, despite the drumming rain outside. As Sarah sorted through forgotten paperbacks and dusty photo albums, from their move, a small leather-bound book fell from the top shelf, landing softly on the rug. She picked it up curiously. It wasn't one of theirs. The cover was worn, the title embossed in faded gold lettering, The Whispering Woods and the Boy Who Listened, by Silas Wren. She didn't recognize the author or the title, but the cover illustration, a charming, slightly old-fashioned ink drawing of a boy sitting under a large, wise-looking tree, surrounded by friendly woodland creatures, felt strangely familiar. It had the same delicate precision, the same gentle whimsy as the tiny drawings Mr. Pendleton sometimes left in his thank-you notes. Intrigued, Sarah opened the book. It was a children's story, beautifully written, about a lonely boy who finds solace and unexpected wisdom in the quiet magic of the forest. The illustrations throughout were enchanting, intricate black and white ink drawings filled with character and detail. She found herself captivated, reading the first few chapters standing right there in the living room. "What's that, Mommy?" Lily asked, looking up from her drawing. "Just an old book I found, honey," Sarah replied absently, still scanning the illustrations. "It seems lovely." She looked at the publication date inside the cover, 1978. An older book, then. Perhaps left behind by a previous tenant. She placed the book aside, intending to look up the author, Silas Wren, later online. But the demands of unpacking, cooking dinner, and Lily's bedtime routine pushed the thought from her mind. The book remained on the end table, momentarily forgotten. A few days later, another drawing exchange occurred. Lily left a picture of a rainbow under Mr. Pendleton's door. The next morning, the familiar white envelope appeared under theirs. Inside, along with the usual thank you, was a tiny, perfect ink drawing of a bluebird perched on a branch. Looking closely at the bluebird, Sarah felt that jolt of familiarity again. It was drawn in the exact same style as the illustrations in the Silas Wren book she had found. The delicate cross-hatching, the expressive eyes, the way the feathers were rendered. It couldn't be a coincidence. Her heart started beating a little faster. Could it be possible? Could Mr. Pendleton, the quiet, solitary uncle on the 4th floor, actually be Silas Wren, the author and illustrator of that charming children's book? It seemed improbable. Silas Wren wasn't a household name like Dr. Seuss. Perhaps, but Sarah vaguely remembered reading some articles years ago about a beloved children's author of that name, who had become incredibly reclusive after the death of his wife, retreating from public life entirely. Could he be living right here anonymously, in their ordinary apartment building? The idea seemed both outlandish and strangely plausible. It would explain his solitude, his quietness, his apparent lack of connection to the outside world. It would certainly explain the exquisite little drawings he left for Lily. Sarah felt a thrill of excitement, mixed with a sense of responsibility. If he was Silas Wren, his privacy was clearly something he valued intensely. Exposing his identity, even unintentionally, could be deeply upsetting to him. She decided for now to keep her suspicions to herself, not even mentioning it to Tom or Lily, but she couldn't resist doing a quick online search for Silas Wren that evening after Lily was asleep. The search results confirmed her memory. Silas Wren was the pen name for Arthur Pendleton, a celebrated children's author and illustrator popular in the late 70s and 80s, known for his gentle stories and intricate ink drawings. He had indeed become a recluse after his wife, Eleanor Pendleton, a respected editor, passed away suddenly in the early 90s. There were grainy photos of him from book award ceremonies decades ago, a younger man, but the kind eyes behind the glasses, the shape of his face, were unmistakably the same as the elderly man upstairs. Sarah stared at the screen, her mind reeling. The uncle on the 4th floor wasn't just a lonely old man. He was a hidden treasure, a creator of beloved stories, living silently among them. The knowledge felt immense, precious, almost burdensome. What should she do with it? Nothing, she decided. It was his secret to keep. But her perception of him shifted entirely. His quietness no longer seemed just lonely. It seemed protective. His gaze out the window wasn't necessarily empty. Perhaps it was filled with stories yet unwritten, characters yet undrawn, and his small anonymous kindnesses, holding the door, returning dropped mail, and especially the tiny, perfect drawings for Lily, felt even more poignant now. Glimpses of the creative, gentle soul hidden behind the wall of solitude. The mystery wasn't solved. It had simply deepened, taking on a new layer of quiet wonder. Knowing Mr. Pendleton's secret identity cast a new light on Sarah Miller's everyday observations of the quiet man upstairs. His solitary walks, once viewed with simple empathy, now seemed like excursions by a man deliberately shielding himself from recognition. His long hours sitting silently by the window weren't necessarily empty gazes. Perhaps they were filled with the quiet contemplation of an artist observing the world, gathering details for stories unseen. The elegant, slightly shaky cursive on the thank you notes felt less like mere politeness and more like the practiced hand of an illustrator. Sarah felt a quiet thrill possessing this knowledge, coupled with a fierce determination to protect his privacy. She gently discouraged Lily from being too persistent, explaining that Mr. Pendleton was older and perhaps needed his quiet time, without revealing the real reason for his reclusiveness. But Lily, operating on the pure, unwavering affection of a 6-year-old who had received hand-drawn bunnies, remained devoted to her uncle on the 4th floor. The silent correspondence via drawings slipped under the door continued. Lily would pour her heart into crayon depictions of playground scenes, lopsided family portraits, including Pip the bunny always, and fantastical creatures. Every few days a small white envelope would appear under the miller's door in return. The tiny ink drawings within became treasured possessions: a meticulously detailed autumn leaf, a sleeping fox curled under a mushroom, a whimsical rendition of the Chestnut Arms building itself, complete with tiny flower boxes. Each was a miniature masterpiece, a fleeting glimpse into the hidden world of Silas Wren. Sarah noticed subtle changes in Mr. Pendleton's demeanor during their infrequent encounters in the hallway or lobby. While still reserved, the initial startled look Lily's greetings had provoked was replaced by a faint, almost shy smile of recognition when he saw the little girl. He still rarely spoke first, but if Lily chattered at him about her day at school or a particularly interesting pigeon she saw in the park, he would listen patiently, his pale blue eyes attentive behind his glasses, sometimes offering a quiet, single-word response like, "Indeed," or "Remarkable." One rainy Saturday afternoon, Sarah and Lily were returning from a quick trip to the corner store for milk. As they entered the lobby, shaking rain from their jackets, they found Mr. Pendleton standing by the mailboxes, carefully sorting through a small stack of envelopes. He looked up as they entered, giving them his usual quiet nod. "We got wet," Lily announced unnecessarily, raindrops glistening in her hair. "So I see," Mr. Pendleton replied, the corner of his mouth twitching slightly. "A proper November shower. We bought milk for hot chocolate," Lily continued, holding up the carton. "An excellent pursuit on a day like this," Mr. Pendleton murmured, turning back to his mail. Just then, Lily noticed something else. Tucked amongst Mr. Pendleton's letters was a slightly larger, padded envelope with a distinctive return address: Puffin Books, Children's Division, New York. Sarah saw it too, and her breath caught. Puffin Books was a major children's publisher. Was he still connected to the publishing world, even in his seclusion? Before Sarah could subtly steer Lily away, the little girl pointed. "Ooh, Puffin. Like the bird. Mommy reads me Puffin books sometimes. Do you like them too, Uncle?" Mr. Pendleton froze for a fraction of a second, his hand hovering over the envelope. Sarah saw a flicker of something akin to panic cross his face, before his usual composure settled back. He quickly slid the Puffin envelope underneath the other letters in his hand. "I appreciate many kinds of books, Lily," he said, his voice a little tighter than usual. He fumbled slightly with the mailbox key. Sarah quickly intervened. "Come on, sweetie, let's get upstairs and make that hot chocolate before we catch a chill." She gently guided Lily towards the elevator, offering Mr. Pendleton a polite, neutral smile. "Have a good afternoon, Mr. Pendleton." "And you, Mrs. Miller," he replied quietly, his gaze dropping back to his mail, avoiding Sarah's eyes. In the elevator, Sarah let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. That was close. Lily hadn't made the connection, of course, but the Puffin envelope was tangible proof that Arthur Pendleton wasn't entirely cut off from his past life as Silas Wren. Was he considering writing again? Or was it just royalty statements or fan, mail forwarded from decades ago? The unanswered questions lingered. She also noted his reaction, the fleeting panic, the quick concealment of the envelope. His privacy, his anonymity was clearly paramount. A few weeks later, as the city geared up for the holidays, Lily embarked on her most ambitious artistic project yet. A large, elaborate drawing intended as a Christmas gift for Mr. Pendleton. She spent hours on the living room floor, surrounded by crayons and glitter glue, meticulously crafting a scene featuring Pip the bunny, delivering a present to a kind-looking old man, sitting under a sparkling Christmas tree that looked suspiciously like the sycamore outside Mr. Pendleton's window. "It's my masterpiece, Mommy," she declared, holding it up proudly. "Uncle is going to love it." Sarah admired the drawing, touched by Lily's affection, but also slightly apprehensive. It was much larger than the usual small pictures they slipped under his door. On Christmas Eve morning, Lily insisted on delivering it personally. Sarah hesitated, reluctant to disturb him on the holiday, but Lily's hopeful face was impossible to resist. "Okay, sweetie," Sarah relented. "We can knock very gently. If he doesn't answer right away, we'll just leave it by the door like usual, all right?" Lily nodded eagerly. Clutching the large drawing, carefully rolled and tied with a red ribbon, she led the way up the quiet stairs to the 4th floor. Sarah followed, feeling a familiar mix of curiosity and nervousness. They stood before the plain wooden door of apartment 4B. Lily reached up and knocked softly. A polite little tap, tap, tap. They waited. Silence from within. Lily knocked again, a little louder this time. Still nothing. "Okay, honey. Maybe he's resting or out," Sarah whispered, starting to feel relieved. "Let's just leave it." Suddenly they heard a faint shuffling sound from inside the apartment, followed by the click of a lock being turned. The door opened slowly, just a crack at first. Mr. Pendleton peered out, his white hair slightly askew, his eyes holding a hint of surprise and caution. He looked smaller, frailer, without the buffer of the lobby or the window between them. "Mrs. Miller? Lily?" he asked, his voice raspy. "Merry Christmas Eve, Uncle." Lily beamed, thrusting the rolled-up drawing towards him. "I made this for you." Mr. Pendleton looked down at the drawing in Lily's outstretched hands, then back, up at their expectant faces, seemingly at a loss for words. He hesitated, glancing back into his apartment almost nervously, before slowly opening the door a little wider. "Well, my goodness," he murmured, reaching out a slightly trembling hand to accept the rolled drawing. "This is most unexpected." "Thank you, Lily." As he took the drawing, the door swung open just enough for Sarah and Lily to catch a brief glimpse inside apartment 4B. It wasn't dark or neglected, as Sarah might have half expected. Instead, the small section of the room they could see was filled with books. Bookshelves lined the walls from floor to ceiling, crammed too deep in places. Stacks of books sat on tables, on chairs, even piled neatly on the floor. And everywhere, seemingly tucked into every available nook, were drawing pads, sketchbooks, jars filled with pens and brushes, tubes of paint, bottles of ink. It wasn't the apartment of a lonely, inactive recluse. It was the cluttered, intensely lived-in sanctuary of an artist. A writer. Mr. Pendleton seemed to realize they could see inside. A faint flush rose on his pale cheeks, and he quickly stepped forward, partially blocking the view, pulling the door almost closed again. "Thank you again, Lily," he repeated, clutching the drawing roll. "A very thoughtful gift." His eyes flickered towards Sarah, holding a hint of perhaps pleading, a silent request for understanding, for discretion. "Merry Christmas, Mr. Pendleton," Sarah said softly, understanding the unspoken message. "We hope you have a peaceful holiday." She gently took Lily's hand. "Come on, sweetie, let's let Mr. Pendleton get back to his reading." "Bye, Uncle," Lily called out cheerfully, as Sarah led her back towards the stairs. Mr. Pendleton offered one last fleeting, almost grateful smile before quietly closing and locking his door. Walking back down the stairs, Sarah's mind whirled. The glimpse inside, the apartment confirmed everything. He wasn't just a former author. He was still immersed in that world, surrounded by books and art supplies. Was he still creating, even if only for himself? The image of that cluttered, creative sanctuary, hidden away behind a locked door on the 4th floor, felt both poignant and intensely private. Her resolve to protect his secret solidified. He deserved his peace, his quiet world built of paper and ink. But she also felt a growing warmth, a deeper connection to the kind, talented, solitary man who exchanged secret drawings with her daughter. The quiet rhythm of life at the Chestnut Arms continued into the new year, marked by frosty sidewalks, occasional snowfalls, and the comforting routine of Lily's artistic correspondence with Mr. Pendleton. Sarah kept the secret of his identity, as Silas Wren locked tightly away, sharing it with no one, not even Tom. It felt like a fragile piece of glass she was careful not to drop. Knowing who he was imbued her brief encounters with him, a nod in the hallway holding the door, seeing him at his window. with a quiet sense of wonder and respect. Lily, blissfully unaware of her uncle's hidden fame, remained his most devoted correspondent. Her drawings grew more detailed, her stories more elaborate, fueled perhaps by the enchanting ink sketches she received in return. The tiny bluebirds, sleeping foxes, and wise-looking owls seemed to leap from the pages of the forgotten Silas Wren book Sarah now kept hidden on her own nightstand. One crisp Saturday morning in late January, Sarah took Lily to a large chain bookstore at a nearby mall. Lily loved browsing the colourful children's section, and Sarah needed to pick up a new release for her own book club. As Lily happily explored the picture book aisles, Sarah wandered over to the classics section, her thoughts drifting, as they often did now, to Mr. Pendleton. On a whim, she scanned the shelves under W. And there it was. Tucked between Watership Down and Where the Wild Things Are was a single, slightly worn hardcover copy of The Whispering Woods and the Boy Who Listened by Silas Wren. Seeing it there, publicly available, even if somewhat forgotten, felt strangely thrilling. She pulled it down, running her hand over the familiar cover illustration. Just then Lily skipped over, holding a book about sparkly unicorns. "Look, Mommy, can I get this?" Lily asked. Then her eyes fell on the book in Sarah's hand. "Hey, that looks like Uncle's drawings," she exclaimed, pointing at the cover. Sarah's heart leaped. "Oh, yes, it does look a little similar, doesn't it?" she said, trying to sound casual, quickly shelving the book back before Lily could examine it further. "Maybe the person who drew this just likes trees and animals too. Come on, let's see. How about that unicorn book?" She steered Lily away, hoping the connection hadn't lodged too firmly in her daughter's inquisitive mind. It was another near miss, a reminder of how easily the secret could unravel, especially around perceptive children. The real challenge to Mr. Pendleton's carefully guarded anonymity arrived with the announcement of Franklin Elementary School's annual Reading Week extravaganza. The event culminated in a local author fair held in the school gymnasium, where parents and community members who had published books, from self-published memoirs to locally known poets, were invited to set up tables, read excerpts, and chat with the students. Lily came home from school bubbling with excitement, clutching a brightly colored flyer. Mommy, guess what? We're having authors come to school, real authors. We get to ask them questions and maybe they'll sign stuff." Sarah smiled at her daughter's enthusiasm. "That sounds wonderful, honey." And Mrs. Davison said, Lily continued importantly, puffing out her chest, "that maybe we know a secret author right here in our building." Sarah froze. "Oh, what makes Mrs. Davison say that, sweetie?" she asked carefully. "Because," Lily bounced on her toes, "I showed her Uncle's little bunny drawing he gave me, the one you put on the fridge. And Mrs. Davison said, 'My goodness, Lily, that looks just like the drawings in those lovely Silas Wren books my own children used to adore.' And she asked if maybe Uncle was Silas Wren." Sarah's blood ran cold, a teacher recognizing the style, asking Lily directly. And what did you say, Lily?" Sarah asked, trying to keep the panic from her voice. Lily shrugged nonchalantly. "I don't know. I just said he's my uncle on the 4th floor, and he draws good." She paused, tilting her head. "Is he Silas Wren, Mommy? Like the book you found?" Sarah knelt down, taking Lily's hands. "Honey, remember we talked about how Mr. Pendleton is very quiet and likes his privacy very much?" Lily nodded solemnly. "Well, sometimes people who create beautiful things, like writers or artists, like to be very private. Maybe they use a different name for their books, like a secret identity, so they can stay quiet, like a superhero." Lily's eyes widened. "Sort of like a superhero," Sarah agreed, relieved by the analogy. "And it's very important that we respect their secret. Even if Mrs. Davison thinks his drawings look like those books, we shouldn't tell anyone else or make a big deal about it. It's Mr. Pendleton's choice to be quiet. Okay? Okay, Mommy," Lily promised seriously. "I won't tell. It's his secret superhero power." Sarah hugged her tightly, hoping the message had sunk in, but the seed had been planted. Mrs. Davison, the well-meaning third-grade teacher, now suspected. How long before she mentioned it to the principal or another parent? The thought filled Sarah with dread. Her fears intensified a few days later, when a notice about the upcoming author fair was posted in the lobby of the Chestnut Arms by the Tenants Association president, encouraging residents to participate or attend. Sarah saw Mr. Pendleton pause before the bulletin board that morning on his way out, saw him read the notice carefully, his expression unreadable before he continued on his way. Was he tempted or just wary? That afternoon, Sarah encountered Mrs. Davison picking up her own child from the after-school program near the park. The teacher greeted Sarah warmly. "Mrs. Miller, just the person I wanted to see," Mrs. Davison enthused. "I was so struck by that lovely drawing Lily showed me, the one by your elderly neighbor. The style is unmistakably Silas Wren. I compared it to an old copy of Whispering Woods I have at home. It's uncanny." Sarah forced a polite, vague smile. "Oh yes, Mr. Pendleton is quite artistic, isn't he? A nice little hobby." "Hobby?" Mrs. Davison looked skeptical. "That's professional-level work. Wouldn't it be wonderful if he was Silas Wren? Imagine having him right here in our community. We absolutely must invite him to the author fair. The children would be ecstatic. Do you think you could possibly ask him for me? Or give me his apartment number?" Panic seized Sarah. "Oh, I really don't think so, Mrs. Davison," she stammered, trying to sound regretful. "Mr. Pendleton is extremely private, very reclusive. He rarely leaves his apartment except for necessities, and he doesn't socialize at all. Honestly, I think approaching him directly would just frighten or upset him terribly. He values his peace and quiet above all else." She tried to convey a sense of insurmountable shyness on his part. Mrs. Davison looked disappointed, but seemed to accept Sarah's explanation, perhaps recalling Lily's description of him as quiet. "Oh, what a shame," she sighed. "Such a talent. Hidden away. Well, if you ever think he might be receptive, please let me know. It would be such a coup for the school." She bustled off towards her car, leaving Sarah feeling shaken but relieved she had hopefully deflected the immediate threat. But the incident highlighted the fragility of Mr. Pendleton's anonymity. His talent was too unique, too recognizable to those familiar with his past work. How long could he remain hidden? That evening, Sarah felt torn. Should she warn Mr. Pendleton? Mention that his style had been recognized, that the school was interested? It felt like violating his privacy further, forcing him to confront the outside world he clearly avoided. But not warning him also felt wrong, leaving him potentially vulnerable to an unwanted intrusion. She was still debating internally when she took Lily upstairs later that evening to slip another drawing under his door. This one a vibrant picture of the author fair flyer itself, with stick figures holding books. As Lily slid it under the door, Sarah noticed the door wasn't completely shut. It was slightly ajar, just a crack. Unusual, as he always kept it firmly closed and locked. Hesitantly, Sarah pushed the door open just a fraction further and peered inside, calling softly, "Mr. Pendleton, are you all right?" No answer. But from within the apartment she heard a faint, rhythmic sound. A soft thump followed by a pause, then another thump, and accompanying it a low groan filled with pain. Alarm bells went off in Sarah's head. Something was wrong. Forgetting her resolve to respect his privacy, she pushed the door open wider and stepped inside the cluttered, book-filled apartment. The main room was dimly lit. Books and papers were everywhere, stacked high, covering almost every surface. Drawing supplies littered a large table near the window, and there on the floor near the armchair lay Arthur Pendleton. He was on his side, clutching his chest, his face pale and beaded with sweat, his breathing shallow and labored. The thumping sound had been his hand weakly hitting the floor, trying perhaps to summon help. "Mr. Pendleton," Sarah cried, rushing to his side, her brief nursing assistant training from years ago kicking in instinctively. "What happened? Are you okay?" He looked up at her, his blue eyes clouded with pain but holding a flicker of recognition. "Chest pain," he managed to gasp out, clutching his cardigan tighter. "Can't breathe." Sarah knew immediately this was serious. Heart attack? Pulmonary? Embolism? Whatever it was, he needed help fast. "Lily, stay right here by the door, sweetie. Don't touch anything," she instructed her daughter, trying to keep her voice calm. She knelt beside Mr. Pendleton, loosening his collar slightly. "Okay, Mr. Pendleton. Just try to stay calm. I'm calling 911 right now." She fumbled for her phone with trembling hands, her mind racing. The secret identity, the privacy, the auth affair, all of it evaporated, replaced by the immediate, urgent reality of the situation. The uncle on the 4th floor, the hidden artist Silas Wren, was in trouble, and his carefully constructed wall of solitude had just been breached by stark medical necessity. The arrival of the paramedics filled the cluttered, book-lined apartment with a sudden urgent efficiency that felt jarringly out of place amidst the quiet testament to Arthur Pendleton's solitary, creative life. Sarah quickly directed them to the frail figure on the floor, relaying the symptoms she'd observed: chest pain, difficulty breathing. Little Lily stood wide-eyed and silent in the doorway, clutching Pip the bunny, watching the controlled chaos unfold. The paramedics worked swiftly, assessing Mr. Pendleton's vital signs, administering oxygen, asking clipped, professional questions he struggled to answer between gasps. Sarah hovered nearby, answering what she could based on her limited knowledge, feeling both useful and like an intruder. She noticed the paramedics' quick glances around the room, taking in the overwhelming evidence of a life dedicated to books and art. The towering stacks, the drawing table littered with sketches, the faint scent of ink and old paper. As they prepared to move Mr. Pendleton onto a stretcher, one of the paramedics, a young woman with kind eyes, looked at Sarah. "Are you family, ma'am?" No," Sarah stammered. "Just a neighbor. From downstairs I heard him fall. Well, heard a noise and the door was ajar." She felt compelled to protect his privacy even now, omitting the detail about Lily's drawing delivery. "Is there any family we should contact?" The paramedic asked, gently securing an oxygen mask over Mr. Pendleton's pale face. Mr. Pendleton weakly shook his head, his eyes fluttering closed for a moment. Sarah remembered Mr. Henderson saying he had no known family nearby. I don't believe so," Sarah replied hesitantly. "He lives alone." They carefully maneuvered the stretcher out of the crowded apartment and down the narrow building stairs. The old elevator wasn't large enough. Sarah followed, holding Lily's hand tightly, feeling the curious or concerned eyes of other residents peering from doorways as the emergency team passed. The carefully guarded anonymity of the man in 4B was irrevocably shattered. At the hospital emergency room, the organized chaos continued. Mr. Pendleton was whisked away into a treatment bay. Sarah, identified as the neighbor who found him, was left answering more questions from nurses and a hospital social worker. She provided his name, Arthur Pendleton, and his address, but had little else to offer. No medical history, no emergency contacts. Lily sat quietly beside Sarah on the hard plastic waiting room chair, drawing intently in a small notebook Sarah had thankfully tucked into her purse earlier. Occasionally she'd look up with worried eyes. "Is Uncle going to be okay, Mommy?" "I hope so, sweetie," Sarah reassured her, stroking her hair. "The doctors are taking good care of him." Inside, Sarah felt a deep unease. She had done the right thing, calling for help. But she had also exposed him, brought the outside world crashing into his deliberately secluded life. Would he be angry? Would he retreat even further if or when he recovered? Hours passed. Tom arrived, his face etched with concern after Sarah's hurried phone call. He hugged Lily tight and sat with Sarah, holding her hand, offering quiet support. Finally, a doctor emerged. "Mr. Pendleton suffered a significant cardiac event," the doctor explained gravely. "A heart attack. We managed to stabilize him, but it was severe. He's resting now in the cardiac care unit. It was fortunate you found him when you did, Mrs. Miller. A little longer and—" He didn't need to finish the sentence. Relief washed over Sarah, quickly followed by the weight of the doctor's words. "Stable but severe." "Does he have any family?" the doctor asked again. "Not that we know of," Sarah repeated. "He lives alone, keeps very much to himself," the doctor sighed. "All right. We'll continue to monitor him closely. You can see him briefly, if you like, but he needs rest." Sarah nodded. She felt she owed him that much at least. Leaving Tom and Lily in the waiting room, she followed a nurse into the quiet intensity of the CCU. Arthur Pendleton lay small and still in the hospital bed, dwarfed by the surrounding monitors and tubes. His eyes were closed, his face pale, and fragile against the white pillows. Wires snaked across his thin chest. Seeing him like this, stripped of his familiar cardigan and tweed, stripped of the protective barrier of his apartment walls, Sarah felt an overwhelming wave of compassion. She stood beside his bed for a long moment, unsure what to do or say. Then, impulsively, she reached out and gently touched his hand where it lay atop the crisp hospital sheet. His skin felt thin, papery. His eyes fluttered open, hazy at first, then slowly focusing on her face. Recognition flickered. "Mrs. Miller?" he whispered, his voice weak, raspy. "It's Sarah," she corrected softly. "And Arthur is fine, Mr. Pendleton. Please." She offered a tentative smile. "You gave us quite a scare, but the doctor says you're stable now. You just need to rest." He looked around the room, taking in the monitors, the IV drip, his expression clouded with confusion, then perhaps dawning realization, followed by something that looked like weary resignation. "My privacy," he murmured, his voice barely audible. "I know," Sarah said gently, understanding his fear. "I'm so sorry we had to intrude, but you needed help, Arthur. We couldn't just leave you." She paused, then added softly, "Lily was very worried too. She calls you her uncle." A faint emotion flickered in his pale blue eyes at the mention of Lily. He closed his eyes again for a moment. "The book," he whispered so faintly Sarah almost missed it. "The book?" she asked, leaning closer. "The Whispering Woods. Did—" He seemed to be struggling for breath. Sarah understood immediately. He was worried about his identity, being revealed through the book she'd found. "It's safe, Arthur," she reassured him quickly, keeping her voice low. "No one knows, it's just our secret, your secret, and it will stay that way, I promise." A tiny sigh escaped his lips, a minuscule relaxing of the tension around his eyes. He gave a barely perceptible nod before drifting back towards sleep, exhausted. Sarah stayed a moment longer, watching his fragile chest rise and fall. She gently squeezed his hand before quietly leaving the room, her resolve stronger than ever. She would protect his secret. But keeping Arthur Pendleton's identity as Silas Wren quiet proved impossible in the small, interconnected world of the Chestnut Arms and the local community. News of the quiet man on the 4th floor collapsing and being taken away by ambulance spread quickly through the building. Neighbors expressed concern, shared memories of his polite nods, his solitary walks. Mr. Henderson, surprisingly gruffly, emotional, organized a get-well card signed by most of the residents. The real complication came when Mrs. Davison, Lily's well-meaning teacher, heard about Mr. Pendleton's hospitalization. Still convinced he was Silas Wren and genuinely concerned, she mentioned the situation to the school principal, who in turn mentioned it to a friend who worked at the local Westbrook newspaper, suggesting a possible human interest story about a reclusive local author facing a health crisis. Sarah was horrified when she saw the small article appear a few days later. "Local legend, Arthur Pendleton, elderly resident of Chestnut Arms, hospitalized after collapse. Neighbors speculate he may be reclusive children's author Silas Wren." The article was vague, based mostly on Mrs. Davison's recognition of the drawing style Lily had shown her, but the cat was out of the bag. When Arthur was finally stable enough to be moved from the CCU to a regular room, Sarah visited him, dreading. His reaction to the news article she held folded in her purse. He looked frail but more alert, propped up against the pillows, sketches scattered on his bedside table. He'd already requested drawing supplies. "Arthur," she began hesitantly, "there's something you should know." She gently explained, about the teacher recognizing his style, the well-intentioned gossip, the newspaper article. Main hidden forever. "I'm so sorry, Arthur," Sarah said sincerely. "I tried to stop it." He opened his eyes, looking at her not with anger, but with a kind of tired acceptance. "It wasn't your fault, Sarah. You saved my life. That is what matters." He paused. Perhaps it is time. Keeping secrets requires a great deal of energy. Energy I no longer seem to possess." The news spread. People started connecting the dots. Old fans of Silas Wren's books emerged from the woodwork. The library received calls. Reporters tried contacting the hospital. The quiet anonymity Arthur Pendleton had cultivated for decades evaporated seemingly overnight. Yet something unexpected happened. The attention wasn't entirely negative or intrusive. Yes, there were reporters to be politely deflected by hospital staff and eventually by Sarah and Tom, who stepped in as protective gatekeepers. But there was also an outpouring of genuine affection and concern. People left cards and flowers at the hospital. Neighbors from the Chestnut Arms offered help with his apartment, groceries, anything he might need upon discharge. Mrs. Davison organized a school-wide Get Well card drive, with hundreds of children drawing pictures inspired by Silas Wren's books, which the library quickly ordered more copies of. Lily, of course, was ecstatic to learn her uncle was the real Silas Wren. She visited him faithfully, once he was well enough, chattering about her day, showing him her latest drawings, completely unfazed by his former fame, simply happy to have her quiet friend getting better. Arthur watched all of this unfold from his hospital bed, and later, during his slow recovery, at a rehabilitation facility, with a mixture of bewilderment, apprehension, and perhaps a reluctant, thawing warmth. The wall of solitude he had built so carefully over decades had been breached not by intrusion, but by necessity and by the innocent affection of a 6-year-old girl. Months later, Arthur Pendleton returned home to apartment 4B. He moved more, slowly now, leaning on a cane, but his blue eyes held a clarity and engagement Sarah hadn't seen before. His secret was out, and while he still valued his quiet and privacy, he no longer seemed quite so isolated. He didn't resume his solitary vigils by the window. Instead, he started spending short periods sitting on a bench outside the Chestnut Arms, sketching passers-by in a new notebook. Neighbors would stop to chat, respectfully keeping their distance if he seemed engrossed, but offering warm greetings. He even accepted Sarah's invitation to join the Miller family for a quiet cup of tea one afternoon, where he charmed Lily by drawing Pip the bunny experiencing various adventures on napkins. He received a letter from Puffin Books, the envelope he'd hidden months ago, inquiring about the possibility of reissuing his classic books, perhaps even considering something new. He hadn't answered yet, but Sarah saw him looking at his drawing table with a thoughtful expression more often. One sunny afternoon, Arthur sat on his usual park bench, Walter Schmidt's bench in the previous story. Arthur now realized with an internal smile at the narrative thread. But today he wasn't alone. Lily Miller sat beside him, chattering happily as she drew in her own notebook, while Arthur sketched the ducks on the pond, occasionally offering her a quiet tip on perspective. Sarah watched them from a short distance, leaning against the trunk of the sycamore tree. The quiet man from the 4th floor wasn't an uncle anymore. He was Arthur, their friend, their neighbor, the hidden treasure brought back into the light, not by fame or fortune, but by a lost mitten, a medical emergency, and the simple, persistent kindness of a child who just wanted to say hello. The library held stories. Arthur had always known that. But sometimes the most profound stories unfolded just outside its quiet walls. Arthur and Lily's story shows how connection can be found in the most unexpected places and how kindness can gently unlock even the most guarded hearts. Did this story touch you? Let us know what you think in the comments. Don't forget to give it a like if you enjoyed it, and subscribe for more heartwarming tales of hidden identities and surprising friendships. Thank you for watching.